welcome back to the Women Faith Plus Business vlog. I'm excited to come to you this week with a really great topic. It's actually a topic that's been something new that I've been really leaning into lately. So if you read the title for the video for today, it's Become versus Outcome. Become versus outcome, the importance of trusting the process. How many of us need to trust the process? Again, it's something that I've kind of been thinking about, meditating on, and really leaning into in this season of my life. So I'm really excited to really get into the content for today as we really go a little bit deeper and discuss the difference between become versus outcome and how it's so important for us to really trust God's process for our life, for our business. There's a process to everything, and we really have to trust the process. So before I get started for the content for today, I always like to just introduce myself in case this is the first time you're coming across any of my videos, or if you're on my website, on the NadineMullings.com website, on my blog, or if you're on the YouTube page, the Nadine Mullings YouTube page, and it could be the first time you're coming across one of my videos. So real quick, I'll introduce myself. I am Nadine Mullings, CEO and owner of Nadine Mullings Marketing Agency. And what we do in the agency is we help women of faith in business who may be struggling to market and promote their business, book, or brand. And we really teach them how to be strategic, specific, and spirit led so that they can reach the people that they're called to serve in the marketplace. So that's a little bit about me, about the work that I do in the world with Nadine Mullings Agency, and how we help. So as I mentioned, I wanted to really get into the topic for today because it's something that I am really learning a lot more about, to be honest, and really going a little bit deeper on the difference between becoming versus the outcome. So let's get into it. And when I usually share on these video blogs, I always like to kind of make it practical, number one, but number two, make it biblical, right? So this is actually coming from a Bible story. So each episode, I usually share a Bible story that correlates to the topic or the title, and also the scripture verse. So you can read it for yourself. There's only so much I can do on the video. I'm not going to read through the entire scripture, so I really encourage you to read through it yourself. So the story that we're going to go through today for the topic of become versus outcome is the story of Joseph. So many of us are familiar with the story of Joseph. It's one of the famous stories in the Bible, what Joseph went through, and it really is a process. Joseph was one of the characters that we really got to see his entire process of how he got to get to the end of his story, how he got to actually reach the fruition of his dreams, right? We get to see that entire process from the beginning to the end. So I really love the story of Joseph. There's so much that you can get from the story of Joseph, but today we're going to take it from the angle of becoming versus outcome. So the story of Joseph, which was Joseph having a dream that he would be a ruler and his brothers would be bowing down to him, and really voicing that dream to his brothers, which he probably shouldn't have, because his brothers were not happy about that dream, right? So I'm going to go through the whole I always do the bullet point summary of the story and then tell you to go back and read it for yourself. So the scripture verses are coming from Genesis chapter 37 through 50. So it's a long story. It's many chapters, right, in Genesis. So I encourage you to go back and read Genesis chapter 37 through 50. That encompasses the story of Joseph from the beginning to the end, right? To the point where it's most critical, right? When it becomes his dream manifested or his dream reaching fruition. So I encourage you to read it for yourself, but I am going to bullet point it. Right? I am going to summarize it for the sake of this video. So I am looking to the side just to make sure that I cover all my notes and cover all the juicy details of Joseph's story in this summary. So the first thing is, as I mentioned, Joseph had a dream, right? All of us have some type of God-given dream, God-given vision, God-given goal. And Joseph had a dream, and that in that dream that he shared with his brothers, he had this vision that his brothers were bowing down to him. Like he had this vision that he was in power and authority and influence, and his brothers were bowing down to him. So he shared the dream with his brothers, and his brothers didn't take it lightly, right? They were like, "Who does Joseph think he is?" Again, I'm making this in my version of the story. His brothers are probably like, "Who does he think he is that we're going to be bowing down to him?" Whatever. And Joseph was already favored. He was favored by his father. So there was a little bit of favoritism going on in his family. So his brothers already didn't like him because of the favoritism that was happening. So there was jealousy there. There was a lot of jealousy there. So Joseph sharing his dream didn't make it much better with him and his brothers. So his brothers came up with a plot, and they were like, "Look, we're tired of Joseph and his dreams and thinking he's better than us and having favor from our father. So let's go ahead and throw Joseph in a pit." Initially, they were going to kill him, is how the story goes. But one of his brothers said that wasn't a good idea. I guess one of his brothers actually had a heart and realized that wouldn't be nice to kill our brothers. And he said, instead of killing him, I believe it was Reuben was the brother that said that. Instead of killing him, let's go ahead and throw him in a pit. So they're feeling once they throw him in the pit, he will eventually die, right? Because it's a deep pit and nobody's going to know he's there, and he'll probably die. So his brothers threw him in a pit. But what happened is he ended up getting sold into slavery. So he did not die in the pit. He actually got sold into slavery instead. And he was sold into slavery and was a slave or servant for Potiphar, right? So Potiphar was his master, his taskmaster, and he was in Potiphar's house and actually doing a good job in Potiphar's house. Potiphar liked him, liked the work that he was doing. But his wife decided that she really liked Joseph too, but in a different way. She liked Joseph in a way where she wanted to be with Joseph intimately, and Joseph wasn't down for it, right? He was a man of God and he knew that wasn't right and didn't want to do that. So what Potiphar's wife did was she accused him of raping him because he turned down her offer. She said, "Well, I'm going to get you back, and here's how I'm going to get you back. I'm going to accuse you of raping me and tell my husband that you raped me." So she lied and accused him of rape, and he was actually falsely accused and then thrown into prison. So he didn't, of course, do anything with Potiphar's wife, but because Potiphar's wife made these claims, he was actually thrown in prison. So while he was in prison, he also had favor in prison. He was actually liked by the prison guards. And at the time when he was in prison, the pharaohs, I think they were cupbearer and chief chef. For some reason, the cupbearer and the chief chef for Pharaoh at the time, they got thrown in prison, right? They probably didn't do something that the king wasn't happy with and ended up being thrown in prison. So they became friends with Joseph while they were in prison. And two of them both had dreams at the time that they were in prison. And it just so happens that Joseph's gifting was to interpret dreams. So God used him and gave him the ability to interpret dreams. So when the chief cupbearer and the chief chef had these dreams in prison, Joseph was like, "Okay, tell me about your dreams. Let me interpret it. This is God's business, and God has given me this gifting of interpreting dreams." So he interpreted both of their dreams and told them what it meant. And so they were like amazed at what he said and what he spoke about their dreams. And it just so happened there was going to be some kind of feast or celebration in the land. So Pharaoh called for the chief cupbearer and the chief chef to come out of prison. Again, these are bullet points. I'm going through them fairly quickly. To come out of prison in order to help with this celebration. And so when Joseph had realized that there was an opportunity for them to be released, he said, "Remember me, when you're with Pharaoh, or if you're talking to Pharaoh, remember me and tell him about my story, that I'm in prison and I'm falsely accused and I'm not really supposed to be there." And they're like, "Okay, yeah, dude, definitely. We're going to remember you. We're going to tell Pharaoh about you and, hopefully get you out of here." So they were released to participate in the celebration of the land. And when they were released, it was like a while after they were released. And Joseph was like, "Well, how come nobody's calling for me? How come Pharaoh hasn't, wanted to hear me plead my case?" and he realized that they actually forgot about him. They actually didn't remember to mention him to Pharaoh. So he was forgotten until Pharaoh had a dream. And Pharaoh was very disturbed by the dream, and he called for all the different dream interpreters of the land in Egypt to tell him what the dream meant. And nobody could interpret it. No one could tell Pharaoh what the dream was. And it's at that time when there was a need, and Pharaoh had a need, that the cupbearer remembered, oh, I remember this guy Joseph when I was in prison and he interpreted my dream. He will probably be able to interpret Pharaoh's dream. So he finally remembered, after he had forgotten originally all about Joseph, he remembered Joseph, and specifically he remembered Joseph's gifting. So his gifting really made room for him, because he remembered, this guy really knows his stuff, and he can help Pharaoh interpret this dream. So Joseph was called out of prison. He ends up interpreting the dream for Pharaoh of everyone. He had the ability, gifted by God, to interpret the dream. When Pharaoh sees that he's gifted and interpreted the dream, and told him exactly what was going to happen in the land in the next 7 years, and how they should be preparing for a famine. So basically, he saved Egypt by telling Pharaoh exactly what was going to happen and how they needed to prepare for it. So Pharaoh was amazed by his gifting and his ability, and said, I'm going to appoint you second in the land to me. So right under, like, think about, at least here in the United States, the vice president. He was positioned as vice president, the second in the land to Pharaoh. Only person above him was Pharaoh. So his dream actually came to fruition, right? His original dream was that he would be in a position of power and influence, and his brothers will bow down to him. Well, eventually his brothers do bow down to him, because when Egypt is in the land, in the time of famine, his brothers actually have to come back and try to seek food for their family. Trying to make a long story short, they end up meeting with Joseph, and in the end, they end up bowing down to their own brother and realizing it was Joseph. So his dream, the initial dream, came to pass. So here's the practical piece of it, right? Because I'm not really here just to share scripture verses with you and tell you to read the scripture verses. I'm actually not even really here just to share Bible stories with you. I'm actually here to make it practical when it comes to life and to business. What are some of the practical principles that we can learn from these stories in the Bible, and how can we apply it in life? So when it comes to the story of Joseph, the thing that we really need to apply is the fact that it was a process, right? His dream did not come to fruition or manifest, like everyone likes to say nowadays. It didn't manifest immediately. It took many years before it reached fruition. And in order for Joseph to become that leader, to become that influence, to become that power, to become that authority that he dreamed he was going to be, and who God called him to be, he had to go through a process, right? So that's the whole point of the title of today's blog, or video blog, so vlog, is the becoming part, that becoming. So many times we're focused on the outcome. So in the case of Joseph, the outcome was his dream, right? What his dream, what his God-given dream was, reaching that point was the outcome. But actually, Joseph had to go through the process of becoming all the things that he needed to become in order to be that influential leader, and to be in that position, second only to Pharaoh. So we are actually responsible for producing. We are actually responsible for being obedient, right? Being patient. Joseph had to be patient through the process. It wasn't something that happened overnight. And he was put on so many different situations, right? He was betrayed by his brothers first. He was enslaved for many years. He was lied on by Potiphar's wife. He was imprisoned, falsely accused and imprisoned, and he was forgotten. The cupbearer forgot all about him when he was released from prison, so he was forgotten. So these are some of the practical things that we can really think about in our lives, and specifically in our business. If we're ever betrayed, if we're ever enslaved, or put in a situation where we feel like, our hands are tied, if we're ever lied on, if we're ever imprisoned in some way, not necessarily imprisoned, but prisoned in some way, or if we're forgotten. These were all things that Joseph had to endure, what Joseph had to overcome, what Joseph had to go through as a part of the process, because anything that we go through in life, God allows it to happen, right? And if He allows it to happen, it means that it's going to be for our benefit in the end, because scripture says that anything that happens to anyone that loves the Lord and is called to His purpose, that it will be done for His benefit. It will be beneficial for that person. So in the moment, it probably didn't feel beneficial for Joseph that he was in a pit, right? In the moment, it probably didn't feel beneficial for Joseph that he was in prison. In the moment, it didn't feel beneficial when he was enslaved, or a servant to Potiphar. But there was many things that were built in his character during that period. And all those things that were built in his character were needed in order for him to be a successful leader. So a lot of times in life, the things that we go through, I love the saying that what we go through is not done to us, it's done for us, right? A lot of times we think, why did this happen to me? Why did this awful thing happen to me? When everything in life is happening for you, it's actually happening for your benefit. It's happening to strengthen you. It's happening to build certain character in you. It's happening for you to become that person that God intends for you to become in order for you to be in the position that God intends for you to be in. So the process is really about becoming, but a lot of times we focus on the outcome. And that's why this blog post is become versus outcome. So our outcome that we focus on is that dream that God put in our heart, that vision that God gave us, that goal, those God-given dreams, visions, and goals is really what we see, what we focus on. But God is also desiring us to kind of surrender. And that's the right word I'm thinking of, is surrender to the process, surrender to the process and the steps to get to the outcome. Because you have to become the person before you see the outcome. So that's really why it's called become versus outcome. So there's actually four things that I really want to summarize this whole story of Joseph and how we practically apply it in our lives and in our businesses. The first point is hold on to your God-given dream, vision, or goal. Joseph held on to that vision despite what his circumstances looked like, whether he was in the pit, whether he was in the prison, whether he was in Potiphar's house. He still knew in his heart that God had a plan for him. He knew in his heart that God had a big vision for him. So our responsibility as women of faith in business, as believers in business, is to hold on to that God-given vision. If God has given you a specific vision for your business, for your life, hold on tight. Hold on tight, right? So hold on to that vision. Hold on to that dream. If God has given you a dream, and the difference sometimes between visions and dreams is just a vision is something you see while you're awake. You have a vision of it, a picture of it, while a dream is something you see while you're sleeping. So a lot of times dreams and visions are very similar. Just one is when you were sleeping and one is while you were awake. So hold on to that God-given vision or God-given dream or God-given goal. Sometimes God gives us a goal, something that He desires for us to achieve or accomplish while we're here on earth. And it's important for us to hold on to that, right? So don't let it go. So that's number one. Hold on to that God-given dream, vision, or goal. Number two is trust God's process. We just went through Joseph's process. It wasn't nice. It wasn't good. It wasn't great, all the things that he had to endure and go through, but it built him up. It built him to be the person that he could be in order to be the leader and the second in charge to Pharaoh. So our responsibility is to trust the process. Trust God's process, because if He allowed it to happen to us, it's going to benefit us. It's going to work out for our good, as I mentioned. Number three is trust God's timing. A lot of times we want the outcome, that vision, that dream, that goal to be immediate, right? Especially in today's society, probably all other generations before were very fast paced, quick, and we get stuff like within minutes. So we expect the timing of our visions, dreams, and goals to be immediate. But we have to trust God's timing, because many times it takes many, many years. It took I can't remember exactly how many, I want to say 30 years for Joseph to actually reach his fruition of being that leader. So trust God's timing. Then the fourth thing is God has a plan and your purpose is a part of God's plan. So you have to trust God's plan. Trust God's plan for your business, trust God's plan for your life, and know and understand you have a purpose. Your business has a purpose. Joseph's purpose was to save his people, his brothers, his family, the country. So he had a huge purpose that he had to achieve that was a part of God's plan. So you have to really trust God's plan and purpose, and that his plan is a part of your purpose. So these are kind of four takeaway points that I wanted to make sure that you get from this story of Joseph, and also wanted to take this time to invite you to something that I just launched. So I'm super excited to share this with you guys. It's called the Faith Activation Club. So we're having a 90-day program. It's to go along with the 90-day Activate Your Faith Journal. And we launched the Faith Activation Club. And so in the Faith Activation Club, we're really teaching you how to hold on to God's vision, dream, and promises for you. We're teaching you how to really get rid of those blessing blockers, the things that discourage us as we go through the process, as we become the person that God has created us to be. There's a lot of things that can block our blessings. Joseph was very patient. Joseph was very compassionate. Joseph stood the course, but there were things that probably Joseph had to overcome that we don't really even know about. Maybe there were times of self-doubt. Maybe there were times of perfectionism. So a lot of the things that can block our blessings, we talk about in the Activate Your Faith Activation, Faith Activation Club. So I want to encourage you, there's going to be a link in the description of this video to really join us. If you really want to be able to hold on to God's vision, dream, and goals for you in your life and your business, and you want to be in a supportive environment, a supportive, sacred sisterhood, that really helps you walk through becoming the best version of yourself, being able to be, do, and have all that God has for you. One of the key things in doing that is really to activate your faith and get rid of anything that's blocking your blessings. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in the Activate Your Faith Club. So I encourage you to take a look at it. There's a link in the description section. See if it's right for you. We're going to be starting in March. It's the second Thursday in March as I make this video. So if it's something you're interested in, go ahead and click that link, learn more about the Faith Activation Club, and not just learn more about it, take a leap of faith, take a step of faith, and join us in this sacred sisterhood of support as women of faith in business. So thank you for taking the time to watch this vlog. Thank you for taking the time to tune into this YouTube channel or on my website, nadinemullings.com. And I will be back next week for another edition of the Women Faith Plus Business vlog. Thanks for watching.